Cool. Starting the streaming. So we are good to go whenever you guys are ready.
Welcome everyone to the AmeriFlux webinar series. We'll get started in just a minute or two, just give people a chance to log into Zoom and get situated. Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining today. We'll get started with the AmeriFlux webinar series in just another minute. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So on behalf of the AmeriFlux Management Project, I wanted to welcome everyone to the next installment of the AmeriFlux webinar series. Is something we kicked off with the start of working from home, and it was a really great opportunity to bring the community together and share what we're up to at the AmeriFlux Management Project, news from the network. But now we want to change the spotlight a little bit, and we've reached out and asked early career researchers in the community to present some lightning talks, so short introductions to their research, so we can hear more about what our early career researchers are doing. Both, these are individuals working at the site level, but also doing large synthesis studies. So it's a really nice spectrum of research that's happening across the AmeriFlux network. We put out a call to ask for volunteers, and we've received a whole lot of great enthusiasm to participate. And so we've broken this up into a number of webinars that are listed here on the screen. So today is part one, and part one and part two will be in English. And then the third part on July 20th will be in Spanish and Portuguese. We have the first two schedules online, and the third schedule will be posted very shortly. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. I'll ask all of you to stay on mute unless, as much as possible, just so we have high audio fidelity. For all of the questions, I would encourage folks to use the chat, but we will have some time at the end of each of the presentations if you want to raise your hand using the Zoom feature, we'll moderate those, and we can also have some live in-person questions if that's important. So today we have 4 presentations, and I'll stop my part here and turn it over to Sophie Ruehr from the University of California, Berkeley.
All right, thanks, Stephen. Nice to see you all here. Thanks for coming. My name is Sophie, and today I'm going to be talking briefly about some research I'm starting on groundwater constraints on carbon assimilation. Next slide, please. So who am I? I am a first year going into my second year of my PhD program at UC Berkeley's Department of Environmental Science, Policy and Management, where I'm advised by Trevor Keenan If you can click the animation, Stephen, that's my office right there, but I've actually been mostly just working from home this past year at my standing desk. So the luxurious life in Berkeley is kind of more home-based these days. Nonetheless, I have been starting to think a bit about research, and one question that I've been really curious about is how groundwater affects carbon assimilation at the ecosystem scale. I've been doing some reading about how there's a lot of uncertainty regarding how ecosystems use subsurface waters, especially deeper water and rooting depth. So I have a lot of questions about ecosystem resilience and carbon cycling and how that affects and is affected by groundwater. Next slide, please. So I turned to AmeriFlux because there's a lot of interesting information about water table depth across the network. About 30 sites in total report water table depth. So I've been starting to work with some of these sites. However, a lot of the water table depth data is kind of patchy, or they're really short time scales. So I've had to try to think about other ways of getting some more water table depth information. Next slide. So I've started looking at some other networks of wells and water table depth monitoring stations and started matching them up with nearby AmeriFlux towers. So I've looked at NEON and USGS wells, mostly just in the US so far, but I'm hoping to expand across the whole continent. And one reason I wanted to give this talk was just to get the word out there that I'm doing this. I think that there might be some more well water measurements going on at some sites that don't get uploaded to the AmeriFlux database, and it would be great to have access to those data. Or if you're thinking about installing a well at your site, I would really encourage that, especially with the AmeriFlux theme year of water going on this year. But this has helped me expand to several more sites, about 89 in total. So far, though, I haven't done much multi-site analysis. I've just been focusing on one site. Next slide, please. At Tonantzin Ranch, which has a great amount of data, especially on water table depth for about 15 years. Tonantzin Ranch is in the foothills of the Western Sierra. It's a Mediterranean climate. And this photo is of the oak savanna during the growing season. You'll notice it's very verdant and green. But in the summertime, if you could click the animation, Stephen, thank you, things get really dried out. And some previous work has shown that although the surface is really dry in the summertime, the canopy is still assimilating a lot of carbon. There's still fairly high levels of GPP, and that's been linked to groundwater. So the trees are pulling up groundwater from deeper in the ground to continue performing photosynthesis, even when it's really dry at the site. Next slide, please. So this is just the record of water table depth data from Tonantzin Ranch from 2007 until today. And you'll see there's a lot of interannual variation. In 2011 and 2017, there are these big spikes, which means that the groundwater was really shallow that year. So the trees could access the groundwater, I would think, more easily because it was closer to the surface. And then in 2014, there was this big drought, and you'll see that the groundwater really hit a low point, almost reaching 12.5 meters deep. So that might have been a little too deep for the trees to reach in terms of their rooting depth. So I'm interested in how these interannual variations might be affecting carbon assimilation and photosynthesis at the site. Next slide, please. So I'm hoping to isolate the effect of water table depth on GPP, which can be a little complicated because GPP is influenced by a lot of other meteorological forcings at the site on any given day. So what I've done is, if you could click the animation, I've decided that, or my hypothesis is that GPP can be predicted by kind of widely known meteorological forcings that might impact photosynthesis at the site, including soil water content, air temperature, humidity, PBFD, and FA-PAR. And my hypothesis is that my observed GPP, you can click, yeah, is also a function of water table depth. So if I can make a model to predict GPP and then subtract that prediction, excuse me, from my observations, I'll get this residual term. And that residual term, I hypothesize, is a function of just water table depth, and I'll have isolated that effect. Yeah, next slide, please. So I won't get too much into the details of how I built this model, but it's a general addition model in which I can kind of help the computer statistically identify patterns that I would expect physiologically between these different meteorological drivers and GPP. So the four figures on the left side of this are the smoothing terms of how these different drivers might be affecting GPP. And the model is performing pretty well. I'm getting R-squared values of around 0.8, although sometimes it has some difficulty predicting more extreme values of GPP. But I think it's good enough for now. And if you could go to the next slide, I'll show you some preliminary results. So these two panels are showing the same data. They're both plotting water table depth on the x-axis versus these residuals. So the difference between my observation and my predictions from the model. So the negative residuals occur when the model is over predicting GPP and the system is actually less productive than the model would predict. And the blue line is a lowest smooth with a 95% confidence interval, just to kind of give a sense of the spread of these residuals. And you'll notice that when water table gets really deep, so the system is really dry and the water table has dropped really low into the ground, the model is consistently really over predicting GPP. So at a certain depth, about 10 meters down, it looks like the system is just really underperforming. And I would think from these results that perhaps the groundwater is just dropping too low and the roots aren't able to access groundwater as easily at that depth. So I think this is really interesting to think about carbon cycling at the system and maybe ecosystem resilience in terms of groundwater. I have one last slide, which I won't explain too much, but I'm also coming at this question from a more mechanical approach. And this is a bucket model that I have created trying to estimate how much groundwater is actually being used at the site in terms of evapotranspiration, and then comparing that to deseasonalized GPP anomalies. And the colors here are representing, again, the water table depth percentiles. And generally, I'm kind of seeing the same trend, but coming at it from this different approach makes me feel a bit more confident in my statistical analysis that generally the system performs better when it uses more groundwater and also when the groundwater is shallower. And we see more negative GPP residuals when the groundwater drops really low. So I'm excited to start expanding this analysis beyond just Tonantzin Ranch to other AmeriFlux sites soon. I'm expecting I would see different relationships between groundwater and GPP depending on climate and vegetation type. And looking forward to expand this work soon. I just have one last slide just to say thanks to my mentors and people who have supported me in this research. It's been really fun to get going this year, and I'm excited to continue working with AmeriFlux data in the future. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Sophie. Any questions from the audience?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say it was really a great presentation. I really enjoyed that, and just loved seeing the map of how many different sites across the network you're able to look at the same question. And you might think of it as kind of a site-specific question, but you're able to look at it across so many different environments. It's really neat.
Thanks, Margaret.
Yeah, so thanks. So there's a question for you in the chat, but maybe Tonantzin, maybe you can ask out loud.
Yes, of course. Yeah, great talk. do you have any information of your site, at this specific site or the other ones, or you will have some information about how many of these plants or trees are groundwater dependent plants?
Yeah, that's a great question. From my reading about Tonantzin Ranch, it seems like the oak trees are accessing groundwater. There have been several studies looking at that. So they've used isotopes and some other methods to look into that. I would expect at other sites to compare my results to maps of rooting depth, which vary a lot and can be quite uncertain, but I would be kind of interested to start thinking about relationships between how shallow the groundwater is and how deep plant roots would grow, because plants tend to optimize to not become too waterlogged or anoxic. And so, yeah, I guess it would probably depend a lot based on the system, and that's something I am planning to explore through this work.
There aren't any other questions. Maybe I will thank Sophie one more time and invite Tonantzin, Tarin.
Hi, everyone. Well, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to have this opportunity to present a little bit of my career and the past and present and future directions of carbon and water fluxes monitoring in Mexico from the perspective, of course, of my career. And next, please. I'm clicking here. So this is the outline, of course, of the presentation. And next one. And next. And briefly talking about my background, I started my career, my bachelor degree. I did it in the Technological Institute of Sonora back in 2005, where I worked mainly with hydrologists and ecologists, and we were looking a lot about to the water flux. And then I had the opportunity to move to Australia, where I did my PhD with Dr. Derek Emos. We were studying two contrasting ecosystems in the middle of nowhere in Central Australia. Then back in America, I joined Dr. Rodrigo Vargas group at the University of Delaware, where I did my PhD, my postdoctoral. I had the opportunity to have this postdoctoral position before I came back to Mexico, my home country, where I'm doing now a tenure track at one of the top universities in the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and I just started early this year. Next, please. So when I started my career, as I mentioned, I was working with hydrologists mainly, and we were very interested in understanding the evapotranspiration and its components of plant transpiration and soil evaporation in a subtropical shrubland in the northwest of Mexico. This is a semi-arid regions that basically receives rainfalls during the summer period or the wet season, which goes from June to September every year. This comes from the North American carbons from the monsoon, the North American monsoon system. And here we have a net covariance tower, and we were using stable isotopes. In the picture, we are collecting water vapor samples using a cold trap for analysis of the carbon, for analysis of the water stable isotopes. And what we found, next one, please. What we found so far is that in this region, especially in the summer season, evapotranspiration was usually 50% of the total rainfall. And we also found that transpiration was accounting for 30 to 100% of the total evapotranspiration during the wet season, depending on the precipitation pulses. Next one, please. And a lot of research has been done in this region, especially in different sites that have been monitoring carbon and water fluxes. But a lot of the researchers has been site specific, and we have like a much complex country as I'm going to present next. The next two. So Mexico, it's one of the mega diverse countries. We have many different type of ecosystems, and it's very complex in its terrain. We have also coastal ecosystems, and so far the effort has been gone. Next one, please. To have sites mainly in the semi-arid region of Mexico. These stars show where the eddy covariant sites are located in the Mexican land surface. And yeah, you can see that most of these sites are located in the Northwest. But it's also very important because Mexico actually has like more than 50% of its territory. It's either semi-arid or arid region. Next one, please. And I've been working with a lot of the PIs that have these eddy covariant sites, and I have recently the opportunity to present in one poster in the North American Cover program, where I just presented basic budgets of the carbon and water fluxes of different ecosystems that are located in this region. And it's very interesting how these sites that receive rainfall from the North American monsoon system have different budgets depending of their budgets in terms of carbon and water fluxes. Next one, please. And we also, I worked in 2019, we were trying to summarize many of the carbon and water budgets of many of these sites, actually 14 sites, which account for 53 years of data or sites. And we presented the state of the carbon cycle report, where many of scientists in Mexico were participating, but we still have a lot of work to do because we have more data that has to be included in this report. And we are aiming to present this report in English and share it with the community. Next one, please. Yeah, some of the efforts we've been doing is also to upload data into the website or database of the AmeriFlux. So far, 12 sites have been sharing their data, and it's so I think 16 years site data that is available with basic statistics, means and sums and so far. Next one, please. And some of the next one, some of the interesting questions or research lines that I'm aiming to following now that I'm back in Mexico, and I'm working in back with many of the scientists in Mexico that have these eddy covariant sites. I think will be very interesting to approach questions of doing annual and regional synthesis of the carbon and water fluxes for all these years site data that we have, and also to assess the inter and intra-annual biometeorological drivers of carbon and water fluxes. Some of this work has been done already in different sites, but we still need to compare and contrast changes in the flux of these fluxes in different ecosystems, especially those ones that share this climate gradient in the northwest of Mexico. And I'm very interested in continue studying the water use efficiency, and this is part of my training that I have during my PhD, and understand the relationship that has water use efficiency at the ecosystem level with physiological traits of coexisting species. Next one, please. And just as an announcement, we will having this meeting coming in October, and it's organized by the Mexican Cover program. It's going to be a symposium, and I think this is going to be great to meet, hopefully physically and But if not, it's gonna be a virtual meeting, and we will have, yeah, the opportunity to discuss many of these future directions for the carbon and water flux monitoring of Mexico sites in Mexico. And I think that's all. Thank you. Next one, yeah. Next one, yeah. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tonantzin. As with before, we have some time for questions if folks want to either raise their hand or put them into chat. I'll start. I was curious, do you have links or to the state of the carbon cycle report from 2019, and also a link to the last announcement for that meeting that we could also, you could feel free to post that into the chat so that others can find those after this webinar. That'd be great. Thank you.
So sorry, what was the first question? I can share the link for the meeting, but what was the first question?
Oh, for the report for the state of the carbon cycle 2019 report that you mentioned.
Oh yeah, it's available actually in the same web page that I'm going to share from the Mexican Carbon Program. But this one is in Spanish, and I think we're hopefully we'll have an English version of this updated report soon.
Hello, Tonantzin. Just adding to that question, is also a link in the NACP webpage for that report.
Great. I'm searching for the web page of the Mexican Carbon Program to share the link. Got it. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the audience? There's one coming from Samuel about if there's a specific webpage for AmeriFlux.
No, there's no specific. Yeah, I think everything it's through the link I just shared, the PMC webpage.
A quick question, if you know if there's any research on nitrous oxide fluxes in conjunction with any of the flux sites in the Northwest. I don't know how many of them go up into the wheat growing area.
I don't think so. As far as I know, they're not measuring any nitrous, no.
Okay.
Alex, you share with us the link for their report, the state of carbon cycle report.
Yes, but that came from I think that from NACP, I think, if I'm correct, if not, but still there is a small summary in there.
Thank you again, Tonantzin, for that great overview of the Mexican flux sites and the contributions. Next, I would like to invite Donovan Davis from Texas A&M for his presentation.
All right, howdy. My name is Donovan Davis. I'm a master's student here at Texas A&M University, and right now we are just starting out. I'm starting out my master's program here, so it's good to be here for the early career presentation. What I have is part of the U.S. Department of Energy's Advanced Research Project Association Smart Farm system. We're measuring greenhouse gas emissions in the high plains, and for ours, we're actually combining this new trace gas analysis with a traditional A covariance system. So if you want to take us to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about that. So this is part of phase one of this project. which SMART Farm is actually an acronym. It's Systems for Monitoring Analytics for Renewable Transportation Fuels from Agricultural Resources and Management. Basically what that means is we're measuring the life cycle greenhouse gases for these alternative fuels, so we can allocate the credits there'll be for that. This is actually a joint research effort between Texas A&M University, Oklahoma State University, and Kansas State. We're all located here in the Panhandle region, as you can see, which we're a long way from College Station here in the south of Texas, all the way up here outside this town of Perryton. And we've got 3 sites. Each university has its own 3 sites located next to each other. And those represent 3 different years of a crop rotation we're doing with sorghum, letting it lie fallow, and then winter wheat. Each of those 3 sites has its own flux tower, but specifically for those sorghum sites that are being grown for fuel, we have a trace gas analyzer. Next. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So the way each of these sites we have, third slide.
You're looking for the next slide, right? I don't know who's advancing them.
Yes, could you go to, should be the third, yes. Okay, so the way our sites are set up, in each of these fields, we have a 90-acre plot with a central flux tower. You see, with that flux tower, we're using the traditional LICOR infrared gas analyzer, as well as a sonic anemometer. But new to this setup, we have a trace gas analyzer. This is made by Aerodyne. It's a tunable infrared laser direct absorption spectroscopy analyzer, abbreviated TLIS. And around these towers, we have all our supporting meteorological equipment, so we're able to measure net radiation, total radiation, photostatically active radiation, and then your temperature, humidity, rainfall. And then across the entire field, we have, as you can see, laid out in this grid here, in each of these 90 acres, we have 2 sensor installations, each with a soil temperature probe and a soil moisture probe. We're also measuring the heat flux of the soil. Next slide. All right, so the gases that we're measuring are carbon dioxide and also water vapor with our eddy tower setup. But new to this, we're actually able to measure nitrous oxide and methane, which is very important in calculating those total greenhouse gas emissions, as methane will have about 30 times the greenhouse gas warming effect as CO2, and nitrous oxide about 300 times that effect. But for us, we're actually able to synchronize both of our readings for these 2 sensors through the LICOR's EddyPro software. You can see here we're setting up the Aerodyne and measuring it. And anyway, this will allow us to double the gas species measured and to calculate that total flux. Next slide. Right, so for our data analysis, we're able to actually measure those gases in real time. We use a Lycor software for carbon dioxide and water vapor, and Aerodyne's proprietary TDL Wintel program for methane and nitrous oxide. Right now, we're beginning our, we actually started last week, so we don't have a lot in the way of data yet, but we'll be looking to give you all an update on that soon. But we're going to be able to measure the fluxes in each field for the entirety of this crop rotation. And that's going to actually allow us to measure the potential for those carbon credits that we're looking at. And we've been able to see a change in the flux just now already. We just planted. Next slide. All right, so the impact we're expecting from this is to finally have gold standard data for the emissions from sorghum. Today we do not have any gold standard data yet. Go back, please. Yes. And this will actually be the first time that we're able to use that data to calculate these emission values. And they'll really better the practices of growing and be able to allocate these credits to them to incentivize carbon sequestration. Next. All right, so that was a little short as we're just starting out, but I'm open to any questions or comments you have about our setup, and so let me know. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Donovan. It's a very exciting new project that you are embarking on. It looks like there are a lot of questions, so I think Dennis was first. I'll hand it over to Dennis.
Yeah, thanks for the nice presentation. Very impressive. I guess my biggest question and maybe a comment is, as you do this work, it looks like it's fairly dry. Just calculate your flux detection limit so you get a sense of how big the fluxes are that are significantly different than zero. And I guess, I don't know if you know that answer already, especially with nitrous oxide and methane in this system. So good luck. And submit your data to AmeriFlux.
Thank you. Yes, this is a very, very dry climate, as you can see up in the panhandle. But we are able to get pretty good data with this analyzer that we have. It's actually able to measure into the parts per trillion. So with it calibrated correctly, we're able to get pretty good values for it.
Yeah, well, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else had a question?
Sorry, I think I may have misinterpreted some of the applause symbols as raised hands. So anyone else have a question? Feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat. Donovan, I'm really curious. Can you tell me about this this enclosure to the left of your aerodrome?
Oh, yes. Yes, so that is our enclosure for the vacuum pump. Right in between our sonic anemometer and our ear gun, and that actually goes through to the enclosure here for the trace gas analyzer, but the pump that powers it all is inside this enclosure here. So it's about a 5 horsepower vacuum pump.
Okay. If I can add a comment, when we were using our LGRs for methane, we were using the dry scroll pump, and they would just overheat, and they'd last us about 7-8 months and cost about $9,000 a year. So we decided to go to a slower pump and do more spectral correction. So things to watch out for as you collect these data, especially if it's dusty. It really starts beating up the pumps essentially.
Yes, well, that's why I have it in the enclosure that we do, and heat certainly is a factor with this. These photos, this one right here was taken well last week, and the temperatures were about 105, 106 Fahrenheit. So that's when we put that reflective insulation you can see around our enclosure just to keep the temperature down.
Yeah, in fact, we decided to actually have a little air conditioner on our box with our system because we were in the Central Valley and we get 100, 105. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Good luck.
Thank you. And you can see right behind me there, it has its own air conditioning system for that enclosure, but even that can have difficulty with just the amount of radiation that we get. Which something else you can see how we have it strapped down here. Wind is also a surprising factor. It gets about 55, 60 miles an hour out there across the high plains, and it did on our last trip. But our eddy towers are holding up. Any other questions?
Great. Well, I don't see any other questions. I just want to thank you again, Donovan, for this very interesting presentation about your new research, and best of luck to you. Next, I would like to invite Victor Paca from the Federal University of Pará in Brazil.
Thank you.
Can I start? Everybody's okay with my microphone and video? Is everything okay? Is there any delay? Okay. So I'm starting the University of Pará, and I worked in IHE Delft. This paper I published from there with Professor Wim Bastiansen, because he created a product called ET Ensemble, and I use part of this product that a lot of other students were using, and then I use it specifically for the Amazon. So what I have done, I'm hydrologist from Geological Survey of Brazil. I work in the north part of Brazil, in Belém do Pará, and then instead of focusing just in Brazil, or where we have the flux tower station from the LBA project, we did a validation for the whole Amazon using this product. So as I add in the title, was evapotranspiration validation comparison with the flux tower station. Then we named this product as ET Amazon, and we added it in HydroShare, and it's open, everybody can use. There is no problem. There is no problem, it's free, available, everybody can use. A lot of people indeed has used this product. A lot of colleagues of mine, because I like to make a marketing about what I have done. So I tell everybody, oh, I did this, I did this. So that's my beginning. Oh, yes, I can. So these are the flux towers from the LBA project. As you can see, most of them are in Brazil, and some of them are not working anymore. As the Geological Survey of Brazil is very similar to US Geological Survey. but we had, it's similar, but not the same, because we have more problems, a lot of stuff that we cannot manage similar as them, because I think they have more money, more equipment, and we don't have that. But these stations from the LBA project, the first colleague, I forgot her name was Sophie. Sophie just showed one station in Brazil, but in fact, we have 5 working here. And I like to work with K67, a K34, that they have a long record of data, okay? But now I'm working just with this 3 that I don't know how to point with my hand here, because I'm pointing to the computer. I can point here, as you can see, in this left picture, I have another square that I show in the flux tower that I like. Yes, indeed, the flux tower that I like to work. Let me go through. How do I go through? Oh, this is the K67. It's in a primary forest. It's very interesting because the annual ET in this flux tower is around 1,300 millimeters per year. Is a primary forest, but it's close by to a deforested area, a logged area. That's very strange. This is a place that it's saved from our government. That's a crazy government, but we are not get this entering this point. But it's a primary forest with 1,300 millimeters per year of ET. Pass again. How do I pass again? Oh no, this one. This one is the fluxogram. Fluxogram. How do I say this? Flow chart. This is the flow chart. What have we done? We got all these 6 remote sensing products. Okay, some of them are not available anymore, and then we kind of mix. We blend. I don't know if in the US you say blend. We blend that, we mix that, and then we downscale that with NDVI. That's a problem because then NDVI comes later than the ET. I know this problem and I read a lot of that, but we made like that. And then we create this program, ET ensemble. In the Andes, there is the bare soil, so we can consider that we have 0 ET there in some place. But it's interesting, in the most of the Amazon, 80% is around 200 millimeters per year. That's very interesting. So can you pass through again? I think you pass, I don't know. And that's was the monthly scatter plot. So I was very happy. Everybody, me, Gonzalo, that was my mentor, but Vin Bastiansin, that we got the correlation coefficient almost 9. Just we tried the direct measurements, Bower ratio, and the energy balance closure. And you can see just one is the correlation coefficient is it's around it's 0.7, but all of them kind of overestimate the measure ET. In my case, that I work in Geological Survey of Brazil, we don't measure ET. We just measure precipitation and discharge. So to make the water balance closure, we need ET, and it's 50% in the Amazon basin. It is 50% of the so I prefer use the dated heat flux, the direct measurements from the flux tower. Although we have some problems with the flux towers because sometimes we, of course, a lot of people, a lot of you know that we cannot close the energy balance perfectly, but we made a threshold of 70% to at least have some data, because we work with monthly data, and to complete the monthly data, we had to do that because unfortunately we had a lot of missing data gaps due to the weather problems we have in the Amazon. And the equipment, Campbell, Lyco, whatever, they are not made for our environment. So I don't know in the future if we can make some, create some equipment for our hard climate that we have here. So could you pass back to the other slide, please? So that's the product. I prefer to show the, although I use the monthly ET, I prefer to show you the annual ET. This 2000 that we see close to the Atlantic Ocean, it's an outlier, but it was from Glean, because Glean, the product Glean from Miralis, had a huge impact in this area. This is another point that we need to study. It's a kind of for further study. I focus more in the problems that we had than in the results, but in overall, the average was good because what I compared more with the literature, what we have in the literature, that is around 1,000 millimeters per year and 15,000 millimeters per year, and then we find, well, it's okay. That's the spatial distribution. But because we got just that 6 products and mode 16 is not working anymore. Somerset, I don't know how to get. I don't know if it's working. Alex, I think it's with professor from Nebraska, and he's working. It's a Brazilian professor, and then he's working with that, but it's not available. So I just have CBOP and Glean to work with. So that's why we made until this period of 10 years, from 2003 to 2013. So go to the next slide, please. And that's the interesting, because I was not used to work with ET. I just work with precipitation and discharge. And then it was great for me to find that the plants has the forest has a kind of buffer, because the season, December and May, it's our rainy season in here. And June and November, it's our not so rainy season. It's not called dry season. It's not so rainy because it keeps raining, but not that much. So it's kind of obvious that because when it's raining, you don't have too much ET. But now, I will try to finish soon. But I speak a lot. I like to speak. And then in the rainy season, the forest release the ET. Can you pass through? So I show to each country to provide the society. That's the most important. I try to provide the society, the ET for our countries, our countries that we have border. Can you pass to another, please? And then this table that we show here, I show here in the down below the third one, in that close to open broadleaf evergreen forest, 8%, and then we got almost the annual ET that we have for the Amazon, forgetting the Andes, because the Andes we don't have, we almost don't have ET. So the next slide, please. So that's the problem. I think I already told about the problem. The product is aging because it's from It's almost 10 years now, 8 years. I told about the threshold, the gaps from the flux towers. And there is another thing that I had to tell you, 2 other important things. Please let me tell you these 2 important things. I want to implement in the company that I work, the Geological Survey of Brazil, this ET using remote sensing and mixing with the LBA project. So that's my area that I would like to work with. And the other one, that's this year we got the record, we get the record of discharge in the Amazon. It was almost 3,000 cubic meters per second in Óbidos. So I don't know in the mouth of Amazon River how much it was, but in Óbidos was almost 300,000 cubic meters per second of discharge in May this year. Thank you all. Sorry, if my English was too bad, it was okay, but please, I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation about your ET model for the Amazon. We have a few minutes. Are there any questions from the audience?
Please. The paper is published. You can get the paper over there. You can get the data in HydroShare. If somebody wants to work with the Amazon, that's interesting. It's a kind of nice environment. Oi, Gilberto. You're going to ask?
Tudo bem?
Ih, tudo bem. You speak Portuguese.
Yes.
How are you doing?
All right. How are you doing?
I'm fine.
Great. It's great to see the presentation. I really like it. I'm wondering if you could speak a bit more about the differences that you're seeing. This is great work, by the way. The differences that you're seeing between Central Amazon and Eastern Amazon, the different parts of the forest in terms of evapotranspiration. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more about that. Just because what I'm thinking is in terms of responses to drought and the formation of clouds, all of these patterns are really heavily dependent on evapotranspiration, right? So all these patterns are, I think they are potentially very different from Central Amazon and Eastern Amazon. Some of the sites that you explored there might give you some clues. So I'm curious about that.
Yes, we made we didn't focus on that, but I can answer that there is a problem over there because the eastern part, the right part of the Amazon, we had the arc of the deforestation in Pará, and indeed the ET is decreasing because the land cover is changing, but the Central Amazon, we can say that is kind of fine for the ET, but yes, indeed, it's changing. Have I answered your question, or you need a little bit more?
No, yeah, this is great. This aspect of fire and disturbance is really important in these areas, and these responses being different are sometimes are surprising, and a lot of folks will tend to look at the Amazon as a block, but it's there can be very, very different responses, right?
In Gilberto, in the Amazon, we can the whole Amazon, not the Brazilian one, but the whole Amazon, we can split that in 6 parts, 6 different parts of environment, because we have 6 million kilometers square in area. So it's 6 parts. We have Bolivia, we have all, and you ask about the eastern part. the land cover is changing to pasture and agriculture. So the land cover is changing, then the deity is kind of not decreasing, it's dropping, poof. It's kind of plummet. So, but can I ask you, where are you from?
I'm from São Paulo originally. Yeah.
But from which institution?
Oh, I'm at Lawrence Berkeley. I work with Stephen and Hausen and Margaret, all these folks.
Ah, you São Paulo. I'm from Belém, from Geological Survey of Belém.
Nice to meet you. I think I work with some of your collaborators there. I'll follow up with an email so you can get in touch. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Gilberto. Anybody else? I would like to ask. I like to answer a question.
I'll invite anyone who has follow-up questions to stay on. We can keep this open for a few minutes, but since we're at the top of the hour, I do want to just formally wrap up today's webinar. I want to say thank you to, first and foremost, to all the presenters who shared their research and with the community. This will be recorded. It will be on YouTube later. I also want to thank all the attendees for their participation, their questions, and their attention. A reminder that next week we will have part 2 of this early career spotlight. It'll be a week from today at the same time. And then later in July, we'll have the last and final part 3 of this early career spotlight series. So thank you again. Everyone have a good Tuesday. And if you have further questions, feel free to stay on. We can hang out for a few minutes.